So to Video Bites, I'll be interviewing Mr. Peacher, who teaches AP Calculus AB and AP Calculus BC and AP Statistics. He has been here for how many years?
This is my 12th year.
12th year, yep, 12 years. I think he's one of the cornerstones of our school's math department, and I'm very happy he's here today with us.
Thanks for having me.
So our first question is, who or what inspired you to study math?
That's a tricky one. I would say I had some really good teachers when I was growing up. My mom was an elementary school teacher, and so and I went to the same elementary school as her. And all those teachers, looking back, all those elementary school teachers, they could see that I liked doing math problems, solving puzzles and things like that. And so they really inspired me and pushed me. But then I had great teachers in middle school that, made me join the, like math counts teams. And then I had great teachers in high school that pushed me. So I would say it was every year I had a great math teacher. And I think that's people that say that they don't like math, they can usually point to a year or two where they had like a gap. So, from my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Bailey, and anyway, so many good teachers along the way.
Speaking of teachers, do you have any specific favorite teacher, or is just like all the teachers you had were amazing?
My calculus teacher, when I was a senior in high school, Mr. McCauley, he was pretty amazing. He was the first person that I ever met, and I've only met a couple of them, that majored in math and minored in English. And I always thought that was like the strangest thing ever. But he just had a really thoughtful way about going about things, and he pushed me into tutoring mathematics. We had to do this thing to graduate high school that you had to do community service. And I was having a hard time finding something to do for community service because at the time I had a part-time job after school, and I had a lot of responsibilities at home. And so I wasn't really able to, just pop down to wherever and do something. And so he said, well, why don't you come to school early every morning and then you can tutor kids. And that would fulfill the, community service hours. And so I started to do that, and I realized, I was pretty good at explaining math to people. And so that kind of launched me on that career. But he was just a really kind, thoughtful person. So Mr. McCauley, yeah.
You've been teaching at basis at least for 12 years. Do you have any specific topic you like to teach, talk about?
I mean, every course has ones that you really like. I like when you first start in AB calculus, when you start teaching integration, going backwards, and everybody thinks calculus is so easy doing derivatives because the rules are so simple. And then all of a sudden you start going backwards, and that it's fun to watch people's heads get spun around on that. But then they slowly build into it and see that they can do it. So I like that part. For BC calculus, I really like doing the polar areas because the shapes are so fun. I know the students don't like that one so much, but I don't know, you just get really interesting shapes that you don't see in rectangular coordinates. And AP statistics, sometimes we get to do experiments with things, when we first start off, when you don't really quite understand what's happening. And so there's a couple experiments that I really like. One, when you show that everybody has some bias when they choose things. So I have a good activity for that one. And then we do another one where we start to look at sampling distributions. And those days are fun when you start, it's almost like, in math, we don't do enough experiments like science. And so in stats, we get to do a little bit of that. So I think those topics are fun.
Yeah, they definitely do seem fun. And I've done the first two in your class itself, so.
Did you like polar?
Yeah, polar was fun.
Okay, good.
Do you have any specific example of anything fun that happened in your class one time?
I mean, the students make it fun every time you go through it because they're, even though the topics are the same, some people say, oh, teaching must be boring because you just do the same thing every year. But the students change, so you have different personalities in the class and, different things that happen. I mean, I had one funniest moment, but it was at a previous school. I'll just tell it because it's a funny story. I taught at the boarding school in Rhode Island. I had this one student that we had our own classrooms, and during free periods, I wouldn't necessarily stay in the classroom. And so he snuck into the classroom and hid underneath my desk. but it wasn't like a desk, like that I sit at a lot. It was, because I'm always moving around the room or whatever. And so he hid underneath there. But that day, some people came to observe me. So there were like 6 adults in the back of the room with the 12 kids. And about 15 minutes into class, he like pops out under the desk and says, "Surprise," because it was one of his free periods. And he said surprise, but halfway through, he could see all these adults in the background staring at him. And so he just like, the class busted out laughing, and he just like quickly ran out the door with his tail between his legs. So I've never had anything quite like that, where it could, only a perfect boarding school thing. I really enjoyed this year the senior prank where they covered up the door with all of the cups and all of the confetti and all of that. So that was fun to tear down, and I didn't realize it's a volume question. I didn't know how many cups you could fit inside that little, entryway to the door there, because when we pulled off the tape, it was all over the place. I don't know. So, there's so many moments. I mean, it's the little ones that just make you laugh and keep you going.
Who's your favorite mathematician, dead or alive?
I don't know. It's got to be one of those. Well, okay, I'll just go with the easy one. So Euclid is always, an interesting one, because it's like, what made him write all of that stuff at the beginning with proofs that we started, and they have notes on it that he even had things that, weren't quite as abstract, but he worked his way through it. And what made him decide that this was the way to move forward when, all the math before it was so utilitarian, measure your farmland or whatever. But he decided to do these proofs, and of course that just opened up all of math that we see. So I don't know, that he's got to be he's up there in the top 5.
Thank you again for being with us, Mr. Peacher on Video Bites.
Well, thanks for having me.